Well, good afternoon, good morning, and thank you all again for taking the time to join us for today's installment of the HNA SIOR webinar series of Site Selection Tools for Success. Today we'll be focusing on labor analytics. Just a couple minor items of housekeeping before we begin. You may notice as you log in and get the audio connected, it is automatically muted upon entry. That is across all participants until the final session at the end. Additionally, if you're not able to stay with us for the entire presentation, a colleague wasn't able to join or wanted to connect again later, we will be recording this presentation in this seminar today. So if you'd like access to that, you can contact us directly. You'll see contact information at the end of the presentation, as well as on our website at www.hickey&associates.com, and you will see that up as well. I'm very pleased today to be joined by my esteemed colleague, Kevin Gibbs, based out of the HNA Chicago office, who really is a leader in our labor analytics field at Hickey & Associates. I will transfer it over to him in just a moment, but before I do begin with the overall presentation, just wanted to give a brief background for those of you that aren't familiar with Hickey & Associates. Being in our 30th year, we are one of the first companies to offer integrated site location and workforce services. Today, as a global leader, we have active projects around the world. We utilize our several dozen professionals with additional subject matter experts in key global markets. Now, we are very proud of many of the awards and recognitions. You see some of those on the screen there from some very reputable groups, Site Selection Magazine, Cornet Global, Institute of Professional Taxation, as well as with Thomson & Reuters, where we now have an exclusive license for our global incentive database. But perhaps what we're most proud of and what we're speaking on today is our relationship with SIOR, which is to provide location strategy incentive in labor analytics through our very unique partnership. Just a quick look at the office locations that we have currently across the United States. We'll revisit this later on. But what do we do at Hickey & Associates? A list of different service offerings, the site selection advisory, tax incentives, more complex incentives, as well as the compliance and administration of those items to ensure that our clients, when they do capture, they actually do end up receiving those awards later down the line. Labor analytics, as we're going to speak to today, supply chain and logistics, as well as our overall global expertise. For those of you not familiar with our relationship and partnership with SIOR, which started in 2013, we've had the opportunity to meet many of you as we've attended the last 6 World Conferences. But what we've been able to develop along with SIOR leadership is a support mechanism specifically for the membership. It's everything from site selection, incentives, labor analytics, whether it could be workforce training opportunities, other workforce support, as well as logistics and supply chain. And those referral fees are then directed back to the members specifically, and then as well to the SIOR Foundation. Now, how does that work? Well, currently, if SIOR member works alongside Hickey & Associates and we come in and support a project specifically, that direct commission that Hickey & Associates receives, 33% of that goes directly back to SIOR. From there, 70% of those fees goes to the initiating SIOR member themselves, and then 30% of that goes on to the SIOR Foundation. Let's look at a quick case study of how that would work. So basically, an incentive value, I apologize, the animation didn't work on this slide, but incentive value of $5 million, the overall contingency, which is can be very competitive in the market at 15%, then those shared fees are at about $750,000. From there, 33% of that would go back to the of a partnership that has been very successful so far. So again, what are those service offerings? Well, today we're going to focus on labor analytics. So with that, I am going to turn it over to my esteemed colleague, Kevin Gibbs. He will take control of the presentation as well as also on the audio. And again, want to appreciate everyone as well on the. All right, Kevin, please take us away.
I have a couple preliminary slides I'd like to just cover to kind of give us some basics about what's happening in the site selection process and the sequence of events and how this labor analytics study sometimes fits into those site selection processes. So here's the process overview. We can actually insert the labor analytics work into any one of these phases. Preferably, this would be in the earlier stages. Obviously, we've done this both retrospectively and prospectively for clients. Some clients have an existing supply chain network, and they want to test the distribution facility strength and of the labor availability and cost at each one of those sites. And they come to us and they say, well, we're thinking we're in the stage of our lease where we can start thinking about renegotiating, and we're wondering if we should stay or leave certain markets. And can you test the labor availability and cost in alternative markets and compare that to our existing network? And obviously that's really good to do, but where the most advantage we'd see in doing any of this work is doing it prospectively, meaning that the client hasn't yet entered the market, and they want to test this along with some of their other traditional site selection processes. So again, that would probably be site phase 1 or phase 3, where we start looking at micro or macro level data, and by the time we get to incentives, a lot of the research that we've been focusing on in labor analytics can lead to additional training dollars and training funds or additional incentives. These are all data that we can put forth as evidence to build our case for those programs. Again, in our client first tier issues, we're looking at infrastructure, incentives, free movement of capital, inventory of real estate. One of the key components of this then is sustainable labor, and by sustainable, we're looking at two different sides of the coin. We're looking at both the cost and availability, and those those are scalable to the project. If the client believes that they are willing to pay a little bit more to get better labor, we can skew that analysis towards cost as opposed to availability. We have some best practices that we would advise clients in when they get to looking at that sustainable labor. Well, the desired outcome obviously is set up so that we can eliminate subjectivity. So how do we do this? Well, we port in some of the best evidence that we can in terms of existing data sets, and sometimes if it comes to this, and I'll explain a little bit later about what way this works, is we actually develop our own data based on survey designs and in-market data capture. So it's basically primary data collection that Hickey & Associates collects ourselves, and then uses that in conjunction with existing sources of data. So some of you might be already looking at the Bureau of Labor Statistics and trying to figure some of this stuff out. We use some of those sources. We use other sources. They're all gold standard sources. And then sometimes we supplement those with on-the-ground activity that is collected to supplement those data, because sometimes they're a year or more old, or they are at a regional level that really doesn't suit our project if we're at a very local level. A lot of the work we do is in areas where there's new development, and sometimes that's at the jurisdiction boundary between two counties or two states, and then you have a lot of competing data sources, so and you have to basically do the project twice. Our work eliminates some of that work, and in partnership with us, we can accomplish some of these tasks based on those gold standard data sets. We established benchmarks so that we meet key criteria in terms of lowest cost and highest impact site, and I'll explain a little bit about that. in a minute. Ultimately, our goal is that our client, human resources, real estate professionals, plant managers, everybody who's a part of the decision-making team, which is consisting of our client plus H&A and any partners that we need to bring in, that everybody decides that this is that the analysis is performing to the expectations of the client and to the project. So so everybody sits and comes together and figures out what the essential components of the project is. This is not an off-the-shelf product. It's not something that you can go to Best Buy, purchase, load up on your machine, and run an analysis. There are some of those softwares that do that, but ultimately they're just not customizable enough to each project, and that's our opinion about a lot of those products. Each project is uniquely different, and some things are some clients are very sensitive to labor availability versus labor costs, and this is where the advantage of a customizable interface is definitely foremost. So in traditional site location analysis, what we're trying to do is utilize the best available resources. One of the things that H&A incorporates is we use those with key innovative sources, key innovations in terms of geographic information systems. We use some key visualizations. We use techniques that have been in use by other industries to find things. The medical industry uses a change detection software that we use to detect changes in DNA over time. We use that. We also use geographic information systems. They're not just off-the-shelf pieces that come off of a web page. They're actual GIS, core GIS software with data that's been captured and maintained by Hickey and Associates and our partners, and these are all customized to the specific project. The goal of this is to quantify the best fit for each site. We can introduce a comprehensive risk analysis to that by looking at things in terms of their best fit for each site, and we compare them to other sites in the decision-making process. We can visualize the data, test the supply chain, and of course we've been doing this for a while, so we have key industry knowledge about how best practice has been accomplished in the past, and we are prepared to share those practices with you. All right, these are the boring slides. I'm just going to try to get past this one last one, but these are very important. So what would you use this site location analysis for? When we've come up with like 4 different cases where you'd really see some power in this. You're looking to relocate. It's a traditional site selection plan. You're looking to quantify challenges at existing facilities. We can run a location stress test. This is if you're in that process of renegotiating leases or determining where your supply chain is going to look, what your supply chain is going to look like, and where your distribution facilities are, or factories, or customer service centers, and we can stress test that by doing this analysis. We can conduct a real estate portfolio review, both domestic and international portfolio review, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a minute. And then for developers, this is great. So if you are property developers and you're not a specific business that you're trying to bring in businesses to locate at your property, what we can do is set up a labor analytics study and produce a report that basically pre-qualifies the site. What we've had some experience in the past with sites that have had a study that's conducted by us, and basically this fast tracks RFIs for that. So if you have a shovel-ready project and they're just looking to qualify a couple different sites, the company pretty much knows that they need to be in market A, B, or C, and they need to be in location 1, 2, or 3. If you have that study already accomplished and have proven the labor out, you're just more willing to, or you're more likely to get that project and that client to locate at that site. So I just don't want to say this is just for companies looking to expand or move site selection. They're also for developers that are looking to attract. So some innovative and reliable data sources. There's two basic kinds that we're going to use. We're going to use quantitative in terms of traditional government statistics and customized to the local relevance. What does that mean? That means that sometimes the data from the government isn't really made for our project. It's kind of supposed to serve all kinds of different purposes. We repurpose that data so that it's at an extreme local level. And by that I mean we can get down to the census tract levels or lower if need be. Oftentimes some of these data come in their major metropolitan areas. So we're talking about the St. Louis metropolitan area. We all know that that's skewed sometimes towards the inner city areas and rural edge areas of that market and are underrepresented. So that can be a danger if we assume things like labor costs and labor availability in the central city area. It might look completely different in the fringe area of those statistics. And we can, of course, pull down some operating costs and other metrics, utility, taxes, labor, etc. We forecast data, so if you need to know what's happening in the next, we like to look at it in 2 or in 3 and 5 and 10-year increments, but that's all relative. We can change that, and how we do that is we start looking, and obviously the closer you look in time, it is more. It's easier, more predictable to look at those and understand those data. As we start to get 10 years out in the future, what you want to do is compare market A to market B, which one's functioning better. And I'll show you a little bit about how that's done in a minute. We look at GIS-based transportation and site access measures. Sometimes we'll be working with retail projects, and they'll be interested in access to highways and pedestrian information. Sometimes it's a factory that wants to open up a state-of-the-art facility off the side of an interstate, and it's going to be all glass facing the interstate, and people will get to see what's happening in there. These are important information, as well as maybe you need to know how much traffic volume can get through certain interchanges. Maybe there's a bottlenecks in certain places that you're concerned about, and you'd like to stress test that against those. That's certainly something that we have. And of course, H&A has some best practice measures of our own that we implement during this process. That's all the quantitative data. That means 1 + 1 = 2. You know, 2 is definitely a value that's measurable. And then we also have a separate data set that we bring in, and usually later in the project. And that's more of a qualitative data set. That's getting impressions or anecdotes or stories from employers and employees. We do that through a survey that we implement, and we capture employers in the area that are in the same business sector. So if we're in distribution, we look at transportation and warehousing sector. If we're in retail, we compare retailers in the area. And we're actually interviewing human resources professionals in the company, as well as capturing some other data from them on what they're doing in that market. We also conduct key informant interviews. These might be if we notice that training is going to be a challenge for us. Well, we connect with the local vocational, technical, and community colleges to understand who are the instructors and what are the programs at those institutions, and is the state able to create new programs, and how fast can those programs be created, and how fast persons can be trained in those. Is it a 6-week training program, or is it a 2-year training program? And that all is very important to our clients. We also use key informant interviews to talk with public policy professionals, elected officials, and other public staff. For example, economic development professionals. And of course, H&A then brings that all full circle to help us build evidence towards incentive capture. So some of our capabilities, and I'd like to highlight the GIS system capabilities. Again, this is not only web GIS. And there's probably services you can join to do some of this. We actually get down in the dirt. We have our own data warehouse of GIS, road files, network files, airports, schools, school districts. We can evaluate quality of life. We can evaluate the incomes of persons, the occupations of persons, how many persons are in those occupations. It's distance-based, so we can look at the distance away from a proposed facility. We can say, well, within a 45-minute drive time, or within a 30-minute drive time. The drive times are pretty customizable. We use a drive time that's a realistic in rush hour Thursday morning commute drive time, and that just really kind of puts it in perspective, because sometimes you'll see these drive times and you'll say, well, that's not realistic. I know, I live in that place, and I know it takes an hour to drive from A to B, so you're probably driving that in rush hour, and some of the drive times are not scaled to that rush hour drive time, and that is definitely a bias. So we can also develop visualizations in terms of thematic mapping, so we can map demographics such as education, income, consumer behavior, and we can kind of put those down in terms of high, medium, and low within certain zones, and then identify potential customers and competitors with the business, and search facilities. We can measure, again, everything is distance-based to measures of competition. So if we want to know how many companies are in a 45-minute or a 30-minute or a 10-minute drive of our facility, we can map those and report that out. One of the great things I think is really powerful, we're doing this for a couple different scenarios right now, is we're using big data analysis and heat to use the GIS to build heat maps. So one of the things that we're doing is capturing the entire employee database, so where those zip codes are or addresses are of key staff, and importing that into the GIS, mapping it, and then looking at the data availability and in those areas at a micro scale, so like the sub-metropolitan area, so let's say city or zip code or census tract, and that's giving us and our 3PL some intelligence on where we'd like to recruit additional team members for our facilities. So now we're going to get down into the weeds about some of these labor analytics here. And we're going to see here, access to labor in site selection is a pretty significant portion of the condition which we're looking for in site selection. Obviously wages, but there's also data on that. There's also labor availability is becoming more important, and we have several different models that we would recommend to you is in terms of which is more important, wages or the available labor. And we could weight each project independently. Some projects are going to weight labor wages as higher than labor availability. Our experience tells us that there are several different ways we can skew this so that your project accounts for those things appropriately. And again, some of that outweighs even the taxes or utilities or the cost of real estate. We've had a few projects where we're stress testing a client's facility network. They're happy with the business that they do, but they are having some problems recruiting workers, and we're stress testing that against potential places they could move to, and then to give them some options that might not be clear if they're just looking at real estate costs. So location suitability is assessed within the quantitative measures and evaluated with qualitative data. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but effectively what we're saying is we start looking at quantitative data, meaning those gold standard sources, and if the outcome is not totally clear, we'll supplement that with qualitative data to ground truth some of the quantitative stuff. So all of our data is gold standard vetted labor market data, and it's integrated with other location-based attributes such as distance-based, where things are in proximity to our potential facility. And then everything is weighted, so you can have unweighted data. It just is the labor costs and the labor availability would each be given a value of, let's say, 1. In this case, a weight might say 80% of the category for labor is in labor availability, and 20% is scaled towards labor costs. Meaning we might be willing to pay a little bit more in terms of labor costs, but we absolutely have to find enough workers to come into our facility every day. So that's where our work with the client becomes very important. We like to put together our best practice and based on our professional experience with that, and then we work with the client to massage that down and get those weights fitted appropriately. So what we do is we start off with a Phase 1 report, and our Phase 1 report, and here are some pages from one that we've done in the past. And it incorporates that gold standard data, and all of that gets put into a matrix, and the matrix is weighted. And what we do is we evaluate sites by comparing them to each other. We can evaluate sites compared to a statewide average or a countywide or even the U.S. average, but what we like to do is we like to have, let's say, more than 4 sites, but we've done it with just 2, and what we've realized is that one site usually just beats another site, and it doesn't really give us a whole breadth of knowledge of what's happening in and around that decision. So what we do is we advocate for, let's say, like 7 sites, and maybe 4 of them can be real sites that we really are interested in, and then maybe we throw in 1 or 2 or 3 wild cards just to see how they fit. And sometimes they're existing sites, and sometimes they're all proposed sites. We put things together in terms of, here's our like a page on a drive time map, and you see the lines are where the lines are longer. We see the longer drive times, and then we put together charts that are very infographic based, and then we get into later in the report we start getting into measuring those metrics and comparing sites A to sites B. I like to the page that doesn't have the title at the top of it is actually a simulated cost of labor at each facility. So we've compared 7 different facilities, and we look at costs today and in the future, and we can even look at them in the past, and we say this is what site A is going to cost, this is site B, and then we're comparing them to each other. And what we do effectively at the end of the report is develop a report card for each site, and that's that little sepia-toned image on the lower right-hand corner, and we just grade everything in terms of a letter grade, A through F, and then rank the site. This particular county was ranked 4th out of, I think, 4 counties. So it scored the lowest out of all of the potential choices. The Phase 1 report obviously includes the drive time and commute analysis. These are 2 separate things. Drive time is how fast you can actually drive from A to B, and commute analysis is the other side of the coin. It's the population's desirability or willingness to commute a certain distance. So sometimes you can commute a very far distance in a short period of time, but if your population is unwilling to commute that, then that's not really realistic. So if you can drive your car to the facility in 45 minutes, but the population is only willing to drive 20 minutes, then that population is sort of excluded from the labor pool of that particular location. We look at geography in terms of occupation. So these are, let's say, forklift operators, computer programmers, managers, food scientists. We can look at all of these occupations geographically. So it's not just by the state. How many computer programmers do we have in the state or in the region? It's more at that lower level of geography, lower than the county. We can look at that and try to isolate pockets of those workers within our labor shed. And we look at 10-year wage and job history projections. So we look back about 10 years. We can look back to 2005. We generally start in 2005 to 2008, depending on the data set. And then we can project out 3, 5, and 10 years. So we can look out, I mean, we could look out to 2024, 2025 if we need to. So I just wanted you to be aware that we're looking at that wage and number of jobs. We can look at that longitudinally, both in the past and in the future. And there's some charts that kind of at the top of this page that show where two different sites. The other sites are kind of muted out colors. They're more pastel colors, but they're in the background. Really, those two sites are the core sites that this client was looking at, and the other sites in the background were these relative comparative sites. Some of them were hypothetical sites that they were not already in those markets, and some of them were they had facilities in those markets, and they wanted to see how these two new sites weighted and compared to the places that they had were comfortable with the labor in. And we compare the business environment. We're looking at regional number of employees in the business sector. And so these images on this page, we look at the drive time map, and then you see the red circle around the drive time map, and that is the distance. It's about a 30-mile distance. So sometimes it just resonates a little better with certain people to see the drive time distance versus the actual distance. And you can kind of see how those don't look the same. The circle is a 30-mile ring around the facility, but it's not always it doesn't always match up with the drive times, which are a little bit more angular or organic in shape. We look at the number of employees in the business sector, and in this case, again, these are the two sites that project was looking at and comparing them to other sites, and you can kind of see that there's certain other markets where you see a sudden burst of a lot of activity at that site, and then in these two markets that this client was looking at, they're fairly comparable. And then we can break down the site in terms of where those workers are coming from. So if we know the counties around or areas around our facility, we can break them down in terms of where those occupations are coming from. So in this case, it's forklift operators, and these are the 4 counties, and the company needed a lot of forklift operators, and those surrounding counties just didn't have those numbers. And that wasn't clear to the client at the time, and now that they've proven out this through the labor analytics, they are aware of the challenges in front of them in terms of getting workers to come to their facility. So some of the topics that we cover, and then these are by no means the only topics, but they're just some ideas that you can get. So we have just general population demographics. So if housing is important to us, that can be in there. Maybe it's income, maybe it's number of persons, maybe it's the working age persons. We can look at tax comparisons between different markets and in terms of tax costs. And cost of living, if we're looking at maybe a headquarters move to a new market, what's the cost of living in that new market, and how does that get then factored into a number of different elements in terms of the move. We can also look at labor force statistics, obviously occupational costs and occupational availability. And then utility costs, industry concentration, the educational institutions and student populations, and sometimes even their high school testing scores we use, depending on the type of workers that are needed at the facility. If they're low-skill workers, sometimes they can be recent high school graduates, and we want to be able to test their numerology in terms of math and science, and then the reading and literacy. Again, union presence, we can test that, commute analysis, income variables. Some things that we've done in the past, infrastructure assessment, we're looking at those interstate exchanges and how far they are away from our facility, counting up how many exit and entry ramps we have to interstates or major highways. We can do intersection densities. If we're a retail project, we can look at those in terms of quantifying how many options people have to exit the interstate to come to our facility. Our primary data is the data that we've collected ourselves at HNA, and again, this is kind of like what we call a phase 2 report. So after we conduct the phase 1, which is getting these gold standard data that we normally capture, if it isn't conclusive, if the results aren't conclusive, or if we want to be very specific about what our intervention is going to be, then we can collect some primary data, and this might be a convenience survey of employers and labor, employee or employer interviews, a town hall kind of meeting with key people and key influencers in the area, and again, an infrastructure assessment, and that would be sometimes we go down to the site, we drive during rush hour, we time ourselves, we give our impression about some things that DOT could do a little bit better. If it's a new move and we're going to be bringing in 1,500 people, we want to make sure that all those folks can get to the facility at the in the early hours, and then at night that they're not spending an hour waiting to get on the interchange. Trust me, that's not some things that we don't think about until we're there, but I've actually driven some of these, and there are some interstate exchanges that are just really terrible, and it's good to know about those in advance. So those are some of the pieces that Hickey & Associates will research, and we use those as supplement to the gold standard data that we've collected already. So measures of comparability, we develop a weighted suitability matrix. Generally, it's more than 4 sites. In this example, we're using 2 sites and comparing them to each other, and if we use 2 sites, there's a winner and there's a loser. And in general, what we recommend is more than 4 sites, and then we choose additionally some wild card sites. So if St. Louis or Pittsburgh isn't in your plan, sometimes it's good to drop those in there and see how they perform against your ideal candidate sites. And we stress test all the sites against each other, and especially those wild cards. Sometimes they can give us some important information. It gives us our outward bounds, how well we're fitting. It's kind of like a matter of a Goldilocks effect. No site is totally perfect. So what we try to do is we try to test out a site A, and then we move over to site B and test it out, and then we move over to site C. And that kind of gives us, which one feels the best for us. It gives us a holistic expectation or realization of what each site is going to be going to look like. And inputs are custom captured to suit each project. Again, they're all custom captured and weighted according to the project. And then we adjust for inconsistent data to the local level of analysis, and I'll get into that in a second. And how we do this is we set up these matrices, and we play one site against another, and then we can set up some benchmarking based on what's actually happening at certain facilities. So it's a really great tool to use when you're trying to make that decision about moving. Phase 2 report captures that qualitative data through surveys and interviews. The qualitative data is used to ground truth a Phase 1 report, which is the gold standard data, and the sites being compared to each other. We do publish comprehensive results that are, the results are qualitative in nature, so we're looking at what are the best practices for retention for employers in these markets, and what is the commute time as reported by workers in these markets, as opposed to a computer system that has everything set up to get that drive time result. And this publication then is put together in a second report, and that then is used to develop further public-private partnerships and relationships towards that incentive capture process. And sometimes those are very clear incentives, and sometimes they're new and creative ways of training teams or getting labor to the site. So that's a larger topic in and of itself. The survey that we use, it's a employer perspective survey. We also have an employee perspective, but I'm going to highlight this. We're looking from the employer to define the size of their workforce and what are their hiring and retention challenges and what are their recruitment strategies, what are the job qualifications at their facility, available, how available is the skilled labor, their ages, gender, ethnicity of their workforce, the commute times, and so on and so forth, including wages and productivity incentives is another one we look at. So that's what's on the phase 2, the survey that we're using. We're actually going into the market, talking with people who are familiar with these topics. Then we're capturing that, summarizing that, and publishing a report for our client to see and review and see how that matches up with the previous work that we've done. So when we do this, we're talking about ground truthing, and again, it's like we're looking for that Goldilocks effect. Which bed fits the best? Which site fits the best? And in terms of ground truthing, what we're doing is we're using something called the nugget effect. And the nugget effect is effectively it was introduced by French and Russian petrochemical scientists about 120 years ago when they're looking at drilling core samples and looking for precious metals and petroleum products that are subsurface. And we're just using those same techniques to find the labor force in these markets. And then what we're doing is, so the concept behind these earlier scientists that I was explaining is they might buy up half of Alaska and they want to drill for oil. They know there's oil there, but they don't know where to drill. So there's a scientific way of predicting what is subsurface. And what we're doing is we're taking that prediction method so that we don't have to look for employees everywhere in the market. We're looking at targeting where those employees are likely to be and live and how well they could get to our facility. And we're employing those practices that were developed 100 years ago in labor analytics. And this person up here in the upper left-hand corner is Dr. John Snow. He determined that this pump here in the middle of London was the cause for cholera in and around the area. Before then, they had thought that cholera was transmitted by sewer gas. And Dr. Snow said, you know what, let's map where everybody's getting sick. And so he made this map down here of London where all the cases of illness were, and then he figured out that the center of that area was this pump, and that people were actually drinking polluted water from this pump. That's effectively what we're doing when we're looking at how to quantify your labor shed. We're looking at where your employees live, where are the assets, where are the likely places that employees that would want to work in your facilities live, and we're trying to quantify those, capture those, and in terms of your facility is a pump. It's going to be the center of the location and where we need to conduct this intervention and look in that surrounding landscape for those workers. How we do that is we divide up the study area and the labor shed into cell-based, kind of like a chessboard, and we measure assets in each one of those chessboards, and we stack them up, and different assets get them weighted on top of each other. Maybe labor cost, labor availability, maybe it's utility cost, and so on and so forth. And then each of these are additive, and we come up with a final result or a solution that then weights all these against each other. And again, those weights can be adjusted. So effectively, when you work with some EDOs, they're very jurisdictional. And economic development agencies tend to draw boundaries around their jurisdiction. We're County X, and we don't really care what happens in County B, and we're just going to report the statistics and demographics and income and occupation occupational information about what's happening in our jurisdiction. And I wanted to highlight that one of the things, the advantages of H&A's process is we can take a deeper dive. We can go past those boundaries and cross county boundaries, cross state boundaries, cross city boundaries, and look at things in a very micro scale. Because when you start looking at them in a very small scale, you realize that you're capturing workers from maybe multiple counties. We have one project that's going on that the facility is located kind of at the intersection of 3 different counties. And yes, it's in County A, but County B and C are only a mile away in either direction. So how do you know that your workforce is not just coming from one county, it's coming from a whole landscape around that county. So when you're working with EDOs, oftentimes they're very jurisdictional, and this process that we've implemented is location agnostic. So some of the innovations that H&A, I'm just going to try to wrap up here. Some of the innovations that we have that we bring into the table is that geospatial solution. Again, that petrochemical exploration plan and method. We can develop heat maps of where employees or other competitive employers live or work. We have social media data and data mining capture reports that we can do. We can look at wages, job descriptions, employer proximity. And then we use our traditional data tables. We try to go a little step farther. We introduce conditional formatting to those. So this is a method that doctors use when sequencing DNA. When they're looking at changing DNA over time, maybe we've sent an astronaut into the space station and they want to look at any mutations to genes that happen every year for the remaining life of that astronaut. There are millions of data points, and it's almost too much to even evaluate. So they use a special change detection software that H&A also implements, because sometimes we're looking at maybe 4 sites to evaluate which is the best. I'm actually conducting a project right now where I'm looking at 180 sites, and we've done them in the past where it's been anywhere from 7 to 30 different sites, and we're trying to evaluate that. That's just a lot of data. There's got to be a way that you can really cut to the chase and figure out which one is the leader and how much they're leading other candidate sites. And that's really what the matrix does for our clients. Is we're actually measuring how much better a site is from another site. It's not that one site wins or one site loses. It's measuring how much more efficient site A is from site B, C, D, and E. So, and can we do this internationally? Yes. So we can capture data and we can introduce a crosswalk and convert currencies to U.S. dollars or to euros, and also look at like total hours of working, annual working hours. So some countries have fewer working days than domestic U.S. companies. So we need to look at those and quantify them, measure them, and say, how much more or less productive is one country's workforce than another. Again, this just shows how we can weight those pieces. It's all done mathematically, and then visually you're given the report as the result of that. But the visual is convertible to a mathematical result, so we can measure how much better one site is from another. And then obviously we put together a report for you. This is a professional-looking report. It's got all the data, significant data that's captured. We will work through with the client what needs to be in that report and what doesn't need to be. Not all the findings are necessarily important enough to justify being included in the report. You get a brief executive summary, which basically boils down the problem. If there's one single problem at a site, we can say here, there's a number of equations that have gone into this study. Really, ultimately the problem is you lack computer programmers in and around facility A. And recruiting and retaining new computer programmers is going to be the biggest challenge that you have. And so, that's all put together in a final report. If the final report then suggests that there's further action that's needed, we develop an action plan. I'm working on several of these right now. This means that you've identified the problem and you are here your desire is to resolve it before you look at other real estate options in other markets. Maybe you have to be in a market. And there's simply no way to mitigate the cost of labor, or that you can't get enough workers to show up at the facility in its current state. So maybe that involves bringing to birth a public-private partnership that can help solve that problem. Sometimes that's monetary in terms of incentive capture, and other times that might mean like a specific shuttle bus be developed, a shuttle bus route from a population center to your facility, or that a training program is developed at a local technical college. The key here is that we can actually start to use a specific facility benchmarks to evaluate the success of each solution. So you not only awarded the incentives, but you can measure the effectiveness of the incentive. If the incentive is to incentivize your workforce by introducing additional funds to buy up the cost of labor, then if really after a year or 2 years or 3 years, we can use this benchmarking process to determine if those additional funds actually brought in and retained more workers. Did those programs function like they're supposed to? So I just like to conclude the presentation. I'm almost used up the whole hour. We do have time for a few questions from from anybody who submitted a question, and I'll be going over those. I think David's going to come back on the line and MC those questions. I'm just going to leave this slide up here in case anybody needs to contact Hickey and Associates. I will be happy to field some of the questions at this time. David, do you have any questions?
Yeah, thank you very much, Kevin. That was a great, very informative presentation, and I hope everyone also found it to be so. Again, on the screen there is contact information directly for the partnership, email address, as well as our website. Additionally, encourage everyone to join the conversation on LinkedIn, and as well as on Twitter. Our handle on Twitter is @SiteTrend, SITETREND. As mentioned on the outset, the presentation today will be available digitally. We recorded it today, so it'll be available on our website. You can also reach out to us directly, and we can ensure that you get that. Also, questions or requests for some of the slides as well, and we certainly be happy to provide those and other documentation that you can share directly with your clients. Again, for question and answers, encourage everyone to use the chat box. Appreciate those who have already. Let me just bounce a couple off these while we still have time, Kevin. I know one that's a good one here is how long do these projects take? You truly explained that some of it seems very comprehensive. So how long does a typical labor analytics study take today?
That's a great question, David. And each project is completely different. Our experience is that generally 6 weeks is a good time period for a phase one, which is collecting our secondary gold standard data and then analyzing in the sites. It can be done faster than that if we need to, but preferably 6 weeks. Then the second part, that qualitative data capture, obviously that's a little bit more labor intensive. There's some overlap we can do, but it might be an additional couple weeks to 4 weeks to capture that secondary data. And like I said, each project is kind of we put forth a proposal and an action plan, and we discuss that with our clients before we launch.
Okay, and then thank you, Kevin. And then you mentioned that there are phases. So the question coming in, why are there phases of this work? Can you explain what those mean and how that approach?
Sure. So phase one is designed to be an initial peek at the problem. We look at gold standard data sources. So we're looking at what is conventionally available to the average person, and but we're using it in an innovative matrix and then measuring the sites compared to each other so that we know how much better one site is from another, both monetarily and kind of like a soft side, which there's not too much monetary we can put in terms of labor availability, but in terms of labor costs we can. So we start to peek and pull back the layers of the onion with phase one. It's an affordable way to do labor analysis. And then if the problem isn't clear enough, or we need to get additional information, we supplement that with the phase two, which is a little bit more expensive in terms of time and cost. And that's why it's a secondary thing. These don't always have to go together. Sometimes it's very obvious once we finish the phase one report what the next step is for our clients. And other times it's, boy, we got to make a decision, and really this data are not really pointing us into the best solution, or maybe we need to think about things creatively, or maybe they've realized that one of their wild card options, site options, is actually not so much of a wild card option, and they want to investigate that site a little bit more intensely. So that's why we follow up with a phase two.
Okay, and appreciate that answer. And another question, and this is one that is certainly in line with a lot of some of these additional services outside of just the transaction side. And so with the labor analytics, and I know one of the fears, and I believe this question is asking, is what is the level of involvement that is asked of our clients? How much of the upfront and that guidance feedback is expected, at the beginning, throughout, at the end? And then what are some of that data that is needed on the front end, and then is also included at the outside, and how does H&A assist with that, at least maybe even alleviating some of the burden? I believe is how I read the question.
Well, that's a great question too, David, and I'd like to preface the whole thing that I'm going to say by, we've been doing this for a while. We've been working with a number of different companies in all kinds of different business sectors, and so we're going to bring in a lot of best practice that we've already been building over the years. But in terms of our footprint in your time, and what we're looking at is a project launch that starts the project. Obviously, there's a pre-phase where we're talking about the proposal and what's involved in the project. But we launch the project, we introduce everybody to each other. We go over some key data capture points with our clients. Those key data capture points might be, what's the size of your workforce, how much do you pay workers, those kind of things. That's a fairly light touch. And then we have status reports that are customizable. During the 6 weeks of the project, we might meet every other week with the client for a call, and that call might last anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. And then that's, again, customizable. Sometimes our clients want to meet more often. Sometimes they don't want to meet every Thursday. They want that more ad hoc. That's easy to do, and it's all planned up front so that you know in week 4 when that meeting is going to be, and in week 6 when that meeting is going to be. And then we conclude usually with an hour-and-a-half telephone call where we review the whole report.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Kevin. Right at the top of the hour, and no more questions remaining. So I want to thank everyone again for taking the time to join us for this installment of the H&A SIOR webinar series. As you'll note, and as remember from the prior 2 years, we keep this about every 6 weeks or so, a new educational session. Please, if you do have any topics in particular that you'd like to learn more about, please reach out to us directly. You can do so from that web email address, sior@hickeysassociates.com, or directly through our website. But also, as mentioned, this will be available on our website, and will also, in due time, be available on your SIOR website as well. Also, if you do not are able to participate between now and San Diego, please be sure to stop by our booth and say hi to our team, Mark Beatty and Mike Molinari, that will be in attendance. So with that, I want to thank you all again, and please encourage this to join the conversation and learn more about these types of very exciting services to provide for your clients. So thank you again, Kevin, and thank you all.